Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Stanley number 341 right-hand US3. This is an offset pivot from Stanley. They have a relatively small offering of pivot hardware that's used on wardrobe doors. You know, closet doors, doors that are generally light duty, even though they do have one that'll handle a 150-pound door. With the package, you're going to get the bottom pivot assembly, and by the way, this is a US3, also known as polished brass, right-hand model. Okay, from your perspective, this is a left-hand reverse door. This is going to be your hinge jamb or your pivot jamb in this case. That door swings out and towards you. Okay, so the bottom portion, you're of course going to get the top portion as well. It's going to swing out toward you. Polished brass, right hand. These are handed because it is a jamb mount. We'll talk about that in a moment. Available in polished brass and satin chrome. You have to know left or right. If your doors swing away from you and the pivot will be on the opposite side from when you're pushing the door, pivots are on the left, it's a left hand. Pivots are on the right, it's a right hand. If you're standing on the pull side and you can see the pivots, if it's on the left side, it's a left hand reverse, but you would order a right hand pivot. And if it's on the right side, it would be a right hand reverse, but you would order a left hand pivot. Lots to talk about when it comes to handing a door, but that's the summary of how you would proceed with ordering the material. Extended information down below. Let's go over it. This is called a wardrobe pivot. Wardrobe is generally, in my opinion, to infer doors that are simply smaller and lighter than traditional man doors or entry doors, let's say. US3 bright brass. This could be called 632. That means polished brass, but it means a steel base material, and this is indeed a steel base material, but a very nice polished brass. You're not going to see, of course, much of this at all when it's installed, right? I mean, you're really not going to see anything but that knuckle portion when the door is closed. Top header and bottom side frame mounted, suitable for floor to ceiling doors. That means that you can run the door as tall as humanly possible in the opening, with the only allowance for what the hardware really demands. What I mean by that is you're going to mortise all of this flush to the header and to your jamb, but you still need that margin, that typical margin between a door and a frame. And then, of course, you'll need the margin from the bottom of the door, well, if you mortise it down to the floor, which is a 1/4 inch down here. The point of the matter is you'll be able to run those doors as tall as possible. There's no way to adjust that at all. You're fixed to what is your finished opening size? What does the hardware demand that you allow for? And then that's your net door size. Or if you have a net door size, what does your hardware require? That's the finished opening that you have to achieve. So it's one way or the other. Suitable for floor to ceiling doors. Yes, door can be opened 180 degrees. Absolutely it can. Provided that you are doing an overlay application. They call it a flush application. I should not have said overlay. It would be a flush or an inset application. You could do overlay as well. It would still swing 180 degree in an overlay using cabinet terms. If you're doing a recessed installation, you're only going to get 90 or marginally more than that, depending on exactly how far recessed into the opening your door is going to be. We'll go over that when we get to the installation instructions, which are linked to down below. Elongated screw holes for easy adjustment. What they're saying is on the... I don't really know why they're giving it to you here. There's no ability to really... Well, that's not true. Elongated hole here. Elongated hole for the bottom of the door. You're going to get elongated holes for the header and the door portion. Okay? We'll talk about that when we get to the installation instructions. Separable leaves at the bottom assembly for quick, easy installation. Sure. You're going to attach your jamb portion, your bottom of your door portion. When you get ready to install it, you'll have the top portion installed on your header, I think. You'll set the door down onto the bottom, and then it's a two-person job, obviously. Get that door to mate to where you've mortised for the top leaf, and then secure your hole. And you have to separate the leaves for that reason. And that's based on the fact that the bottom leaf can be pulled apart. If you were to have a fixed leaf on the bottom portion, you could still make it all work. You would just have the hardware attached to the door. As you put the door in place, you'd have to shim it and then secure it. So you could do it that way as well, but it's not necessary with this Stanley 341. Bushing at the top, bushing at the pivot point, assure smooth, silent operation. Edge mortise door leaves, standard practice. What they're saying is you're going to mortise the edge of your door. If your door is 1 3/8 thick, your router is going to actually exit the edge of the door, which when they say standard practice for wardrobe or knife or scissors pivots, yeah, you exit off of the workpiece with your mortising. We'll talk about that when we get to the installation instructions. Right-handed. Now, before we go further, let's take a look at the cut sheet. That is linked to down below. 3 links. Cut sheet, installation instructions, product catalog. The cut sheet is really an overview of what the product catalog shows. A little bit more detail. It does give you some dimensional properties, which we are going to touch on. And we'll expand on. Let's expand on it right now. So they're showing you all of the dimensional properties, and I can see what they're giving us for the jam portion. All of the paperwork on the installation instructions are premised on you surface mounting this. I do not see any reason why you could not mortise this at all, and we'll talk about that when we get to the installation instructions, because they want an unusually heavy gap over here. Now, when you're doing wardrobe doors, and keep in mind, this sort of hardware was very likely used in regular suburban home, track home construction in the 1960s, meaning the stuff was built and built well using quality components, but the level of incredible detail over how the margins would be were not really being adhered to because it wasn't important. 1977 is the date of this document. So this document is the document in 2019 that they are sending since it's not changed since in 45 years, basically. And they allow for a really heavy margin on the side of the door, and I'm seeing some conflicting information, I think. Perhaps not. We'll talk about it. This template is very difficult to read. We'll get to it when we get to it, because it's a copy of, it's a 100th generation copy. Dimensional properties of all the leaves are there in overview, and that is right hand or left hand reverse as shown. Now the product catalog is handy because it will show you the different pivots available. So the 340 is the most common of all Stanley pivots. That's it. For every 341 I sell 100 340s, so be mindful of that. The 327 is nice because it's rated for that 150-pound door rating, which is handy. So if you're doing a full-size door, that's the pivot. Like a full-weight door, that's the pivot to go to. And then the 342 is the lighter version of the 327, and it would be akin to the 341 that I have here in terms of its construction, the thickness of the material, and what it's rated for. The 341 is indeed rated for a 75-pound door. So wardrobe doors, they're going to be 1 3/8, they're going to be 2'8", they're going to be 6'8", and that's going to be in the range of what or actually even smaller, maybe pairs of 1'6" doors, smaller, lighter material, even though still solid core. This hardware is really geared towards that. Then we have the link to the installation instructions, and let's review that. In step 1, they do have a definition of terms that is there that we need to look at. So you're either doing a flush or an inset. I'm using cabinet door terms. Flush, where the door is flush with the face of the wall. People want that because they want the doors to disappear to the wall as best as possible. And really all you're seeing is a very small amount of exposed hardware. So whether you're running chair rail across a wall that's got a door, or you're doing a cork detail, some sort of a square profile that runs on the wall and then through the face of the door, whatever it might be. An inset application is certainly going to permit the door to blend to the wall as best as possible. If you're doing a recessed installation, you can set that door back in and deep. That's not uncommon either. I've sold this hardware to people who had a bedroom with a hallway that served access to a walk-in closet, but flanking on either side was his and her restroom, lavatories. And the approach from the bedroom to this hallway, the access in front of all of that was such that the door needed to swing, but not swing out so far as to encroach into that access on the bedroom side. So you can move that back in, and that's exactly where they use that. It may have been a pair of doors, I don't remember. So determining exactly where you're going to install the material is what's up next for you. Getting to step 2 is where you're going to define your margin. Reading step 2, for flush or recessed door application, the door clearance should be 3/16 between the hinged side of the door and side jamb. This is automatically set by the bottom hinge leaf. Okay, so what they're saying is the dimension from the edge of the door to the jamb, which is the back side of the pivot, is 3/16. That is mandatorily determined by how this is simply assembled. Okay, 3/16. You could, and I don't really see why you couldn't, decrease that by mortising this to the frame. Or at least partially, so that you can have 1/8 of an inch margin on all sides. It's a single acting offset hung door. You would probably want to bevel the stiles, okay? And I would see no reason why you couldn't do that. I would see no reason why you have to do it, but if you did want to increase that margin or decrease that margin, you certainly could. The thickness of this plate is 131 thousandths. So if you were to mortise that basically 1/8 of an inch, you would be able to achieve an incredibly tight margin over here. Okay, it's really not, if you were to mortise that flush, your door is going to be really close on, to that jamb. It's going to be technically below 1/16, and I don't know that you want to really approach that. But if you wanted to hack the hardware and the installation a bit, I don't see why you would not be able to do that. Mortise that a bit flush. Atypical, not mentioned in the installation instructions at all. Mark the clearance with a line on the hinged side of the header. And they're showing that in step 3. Up at the header, go from the jamb over 3/16 and put a line. You're going to need that line to gauge where you're going to place your top pivot. Now, height of door opening, assuming mortised door leaves. If you're going to mortise the leaf to the bottom of the door and to the top of the door, the following applies. And that leaf thickness is probably the same gauge of material. Yeah, 130 thousandths. The caliper is really the second best friend of the carpenter, right behind the router. Height of the door opening, assuming mortise door leaves, equals door height plus 5/8. So whatever your net door height, add 5/8 of an inch. You're going to need that to get your hardware installed. For non-mortised hinges, door opening height equals door height plus 7/8 of an inch. So there's a 1/4 inch there. These dimensions allow for vertical adjustment of the bottom hinge jamb leaf and sufficient clearance under the door. The bottom hinge jamb leaf will be a 1/4 inch off the floor using door height plus 5/8. Let's stop right there. They're saying 1/4 inch. From the bottom of the door to the bottom of that plate is going to be 1/4 inch. That's where that's going to come in. Okay? From here down to the floor. The point of the matter is you're going to have a 1/4 inch margin. Undercut. If that's not enough, then we have to do something. And that is addressed next. If carpet or other special floor coverings are used, or if your floor is severely not level, the opening height must be increased by the thickness of that adjustment. The carpet, the out of level, door stops. Okay, door stops should be provided. Okay, that in a moment. So you can put a block of wood underneath here, plywood, whatever, if you've got carpeting. Build that up. Your net door height's going to be decreased by that amount. Maybe you don't want a 1/4 inch, but you want something closer to 3/8. Well, surface mount your leaf down here. Adjust your door height by that amount. Let your door rest on top of this rather than mortise it, so you can play with that as well. Then it goes on to say door stops should be provided. Sure, when your door is open and you close it, you want to have something to stop the door again so the door doesn't hyperextend into the opening. You can easily damage everything by not providing door stops. At least something like a roller latch or an angle stop. A roller latch that incorporates a stop. A auxiliary angle stop would be easy. Perhaps even a touch latch. That might be okay as well. You'd have to really think that through though. Because no, actually, I don't know that that would work. I would probably avoid everything I just said about a touch. Well, some touch latches, I suppose. Magnetic catch would be good. You could have a. I don't know that Stanley makes a magnetic catch, but others do. A triple, double pole magnetic catch would act as a stop very nicely. Step 3 shows at 3/16 of an inch clearance. It also shows they want a line on the header to represent the door thickness, and then one on the jamb, so that when you get the unit put in place, when you get your hardware put in place, you know where you're margining to, where it has to be installed to. And that leads us to step 4. Step 4, position the top hinge header leaf as shown. Line up door with door thickness and clearance lines. So 3/16 over your door thickness line. You're going to place it up in the header, and that's exactly where you're going to mark it. There's no measuring. They're just saying, well, I mean, you've got to mark your lines, but just margin that off to the line. Mark the center of your elongated hole. Draw on header the outline of the elongated hole in header leaf. Okay, now you've got your header marked. Step 5, position bottom hinge jamb leaf on jamb at distance from the header equal to the door height less I'm struggling with that dimension is so poor. Okay, based on what I can tell here, position bottom hinge jamb leaf on jamb at a distance from the header equal to the height, the door height, less, I'm going to go with 2 and 9/16. Based on mortised leaves. Because if you're doing non-mortised leaves, the dimension I can read more clearly is, this dimension assumes mortised door leaves. The non-mortised hinges, the distance should equal, for non-mortised hinges, the distance should be equal to the door height less 2 and 5/16. So that's where that 1/4 inch comes in. Your top margin is going to be the same regardless. It's not actually at all regardless. But what we're really looking at here is the 2 and 5/16. What we're dealing with is the thickness of each leaf, and I'm sure they intend that these are 1/8 of an inch thick each, here and here. Okay, so that logically has to be it. You're going to take that bottom jamb and you're going to place it on your door thickness line that you put on the jamb. You're going to flush that right off to here. At that point, you're done. The door thickness lines are based on where you're positioning the door in the opening. Is it flush or is it recessed? Okay. Mark the center of the elongated hole and then fix this to the jamb. Okay. Now this is attached with one relatively loose screw in the elongated hole. Screws are included. They look like number 12 by 1 inch. You're going to for sure pre-drill those holes. If you're going into softwood, maybe go with a pre-drill size of about 80% of your root diameter. If you're going into hardwoods, maybe go the root diameter of the screw, or maybe only slightly less. Wire diameter, wire size drill bit index sets are the best way to do that. Calipers to measure everything, best way to do it. Step 6, top door leaf, apply flush with inside corner of door. Now we're talking about how to mortise not only the top of the door, but the same will apply for the bottom of the door because these leaves are the same. So they're showing us that we've got a 2.5 inch long mortise for the leaf, top and bottom of the door. Yep, 2.5. And then we're going to go with 1 inch over here for the spindle or knuckle assembly, I suppose, to protrude. And this is 15/16. Okay? And the point of the matter is when they say that it's standard practice, edge mortise door leaves, they're referring to right here where your router, your preparation is going to exit the edge of the door. Because again, in those standard knife, scissors, pivots like this, you install that hardware to the header and then to the jamb, and then you bring, what you do is you attach your hardware to the door, then you bring your door into the opening and then secure it to the header and to the sill, like in cabinet work is what they're really referring to. You've got your mortise. They don't tell us a thickness of the mortise, I don't believe. I measured 130 thousandths. I would mortise it that way. Top of door mortise, as shown on top and bottom of door if minimum clearance is required, otherwise leave it surface mounted. Mortising may be eliminated if an approximate 5/16 clearance is acceptable. Approximate. Okay. In step 5, we're talking a 1/4 inch difference. Now, step 7, you have your, let's back up. You apply this to the top of the door, to your door leaf, which is here. Elongated hole gets the screw. They're actually showing it in both locations. That's certainly okay to do because actually I would hold off on that. Elongated hole only. Okay. This is attached to the top of the door. You're going to separate this, and that's where the separable leaves. Get this attached to the bottom of your door, elongated hole. This is attached to the frame. Now, just imagine all of this is attached now to the door. We've got everything attached. You're going to get that door. You're going to place it down on top of the bottom stud. You're going to get that placed over there. Your door is open at 90 degrees. Okay. Your hardware is going to be hanging out like this. You're going to mark the rest of your holes everywhere that you're going to need, and you're going to test your door to make sure that it's margined correctly. The elongated holes, loosening the screw, will allow for lateral adjustment. If you were doing something where you needed to effect change on this, you could loosen that. You might pad that up a little bit if you had to for whatever reason, or if you were using a block to clear carpeting or some flooring issue. And then once you know you have everything settled, you'll secure in your elongated holes. Then when you're positive that your margins are exactly correct, you'll then drill your fixed holes and set your screws, and that will keep it in place. And we immediately jumped into step 8 as well. Except that, again, observe your 3/16 dimension from the jamb to the start of the pivot when you get the door placed down and then moved into position. Leave gap. Make final door alignment if necessary by tapping leaves that have elongated holes. Tighten all screws. Caution, the top door leaf must not touch the head of the top hinge stud. I believe they're saying make no contact with this at all, because every time the door opens and closes, that top pivot stud does not move, and you sure don't want to have any sort of action, rotational action on that pivot stud. So make some sort of an accounting for that should you need to. That dimension, if you're doing 1 3/4 thick doors, you're going to have to account for that. Or you're going to have a back set, however you're going to mortise that. So, you know, we know that that's, what is it, 15/16? Right, it's 15/16. So be mindful that you may hold that back if you've got thick. You will hold it back if you've got a thicker door. So there, if you're doing 1 3/4, you know, you're going to have about a 5/16 back set on the preparation of the pivot hardware itself. And that gets us to where the installation instructions are now exhausted, and you're probably exhausted as well. Finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Stanley products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog by Stanley. I will readily admit to anyone who asks that Stanley is a brand of hinges that I'm very partial to, and the reason is, and I don't sell a ton of Stanley, but the reason is that I believe that they have significantly above average fit and finish on their hardware. The stuff just looks phenomenal. Okay, the quality of the finish, they do a great job at making sure that it looks great, and they do it over and over again. The link below this video to the manufacturer's page is going to allow you to get to that full product catalog where you can pull up the hardware catalog, and you're going to see an encyclopedic approach to hinges, the types, the sizes, the availabilities, the options. It's not to say that Stanley wrote the book on hinges, but when you read that those initial pages of the document, you might say to yourself, I think they wrote the book on hinges. So that's another reason that I'm partial to them. If you have any questions on the Stanley 341 in a US3 right hand or any other Stanley product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.